Hi, welcome to Hardcover Feedback. I'm Brandy Smits, and today I have a new co-host with me. This is Tracy Hill. Before we get into talking about the books, we're going to give you a little bit of rundown about who we are and what we're doing. I still work at the Lansing Public Library. I am a full-time librarian specializing in teens, and I'm currently pursuing my master's degree in Library and Information Sciences at San Jose State University.
And I'm Tracy Hill, and I also work at Lansing Public Library. I've been there for a few years, and I work in reference with Brandy downstairs in Youth and Teen Services. And I've already been to graduate school a long time ago. I have a master's degree in English, and I did a brief stint in book publishing.
All right, so we have three titles for you today. The first one is a Western written by a very well-known musical artist. The second is a romance that's a little kind of convoluted with strange, crazy old people. And the third book is a horror novel about a classic icon in history who goes battling against demons and undead villains. So let's start with the first book. The first book is A Tale Out of Luck by Willie Nelson. Retired Texas Ranger Captain Hank Tomlinson intends to spend the rest of his days raising cattle on his Broken Arrow Ranch and nurturing the frontier town of Luck, Texas. But when the brutal murder and scalping of a mysterious drifter leads to a clash between the cavalry soldiers and a band of Comanche Indians suspected of the killing, a full-scale Indian uprising seems likely. Worse yet, the murder of the drifter bears a disturbing resemblance to a string of killings Hank remembers from his distant and violent past as a ranger.
Now, Hank knew that if he wanted to prove that Wes James was a cattle rustler, he could point to that hiding place for the running iron and convince anybody in the great state of Texas. He wasn't sure that meant a whole lot to his investigation, but he was starting to get a clearer picture of what had happened 3 evenings ago up on Shovel Mountain, and it didn't involve poor old Crazy Bear or any of his warriors. One thing was becoming obvious. Jack Brennan had flown way off the handle when he launched the attack on Crazy Bear's camp. The survivors of the attack would remember him. Hank mused that he wouldn't want to be in Jack Brennan's boots should the Comanches recruit a revenge party and raid the Double Horn Ranch.
All right. So obviously the ideal nature of this book is it's written by Willie Nelson, which is just, you know.
That was exciting all by itself. It's like, yay, Willie Nelson.
I'm not one person who really enjoys reading books by celebrities, because most of the time I'm like, okay, yeah, it does have a co-author. We should probably give a little shout out to Mike Blakely, who wrote this with Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, is this really legit, or is this more of just a publicity stunt trying to get something, extra cash on the side? But I was impressed. I was.
Yeah, and because Willie Nelson, with his songwriting ability, he seemed like a great choice to write a book and tell a story that way. So it makes sense. He writes great songs. The man knows how to tell a story.
And it was. And it was very interesting. It's 3 stories in, I guess you could say 3 stories in one. There's 3 characters that you follow mainly throughout the entire novel, and that's Hank Tomlinson, that's the main guy, the Texas Ranger. And then there's Jay Blue and Skeeter, who are kind of young, kind of headstrong, part of the cattle rustling area. Yeah. And then there's the one Indian boy known as the Wolf. And we kind of get a little insight into him as well.
Yes. And all of them were interesting. It's the investigation of the murder in the story gets the most weight, but even though these other stories are technically subplots, they're just as interesting as the main story, and sometimes even more so. I mean, the way that they come up is very organic, and they capture interest. They hold interest. It's not like, oh, here's that boring little subplot again. It flows very easily from one part of the story to another, and each one just draws you in, and they do tend to come together.
And I think it's like you said when you got done reading it. It sounds like a movie. It feels like a movie, and it's like you want the popcorn. You want, it draws you in, and even though movies tend to ruin books, this would be a really interesting, book to movie. I'd watch it.
It would
watch it.
Very cinematic. It was a total popcorn muncher because I could just see, a whole audience of people watching this on screen, just digging into their popcorn, eating it up, and just following the action along because the action doesn't stop. It keeps going. It's a little slow to start with, but after you get over, the initial murder that sparks the investigation, then it just keeps going from there.
And it has like a good, trying to think of the word, it has a good feel to it, vernacular wise, it's written really well, as it feels like it is not someone who is, I'm going to write me a Western, so I'm going to talk it has a very appropriate feel to the time period as well.
Yes, you're right. That wasn't something that came up to me consciously, but yes, absolutely. It was genuine that way.
It was, and Willie Nelson is, I guess you can call him a modern day cowboy. I would call him a modern day cowboy.
Let's do that.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see what we thought. What'd you give this rating wise for you?
I really enjoyed it, and partly because it was so cinematic, and I don't really read Westerns very much, so it was a solid 3 for sure.
Okay. I'm kind of in the same boat. I've read maybe 2 or 3 Westerns in my life. I like watching them, just really never gotten into reading them.
Yeah.
But I was impressed by this one, and I think I'm gonna agree with you. I'll give it a 3 as well. I think it was very well done, and yeah. So
okay,
we'll be right back with our next book. Stick around. Welcome back, everybody. The next book on our show today is called Lovesick by Alex Wellen. For Andy Altman, it was love at first sight. Andy vowed to do whatever it took to make Paige Day his bride, even if that meant dragging himself back to the small town of Crockett, California, and working for her father, Gregory, the local pharmacist and most demanding boss ever. Andy does everything he can to win over Gregory, even if that means avoiding financial ruin, Paige's aggressive ex-boyfriend, and a crime ring of geriatric gangsters.
Our delivery guy, Manny Milken, is 30 minutes late, and Gregory is annoyed, which is good news for me. Anything to deflect attention from our latest argument, somewhere on the order of a magnitude 4.0. Gregory was mad because I forgot to slap a red "Do not take this medication with antacids" label on one of our orders. I don't see the big deal. All of our prescriptions come with an instruction booklet. But Gregory thinks no one reads those. He's probably right. I never do. Manny has an excuse for everything. Today it's FedEx's fault.
All right. So, Lovesick is kind of like one of those sugar-coated romance novels where the more you go through it, the more it just kind of melts away into nothing.
Yep. The word for it is cute.
Yeah.
Cute at best. Cute, and like you said, it just fades away and there's no real substance. The romance is the least interesting part of the book.
That's what I was going to say too. It's more like I want to hear more about Andy and his elderly friend Sid's crazy patent. They keep trying to make new inventions. There was a car with a vacuum on it or something.
Yes,
with a detailed drawing in the book,
funny.
Which was cool.
I mean, that was fun. And yes, Sid was interesting. His wife Cookie, with her curmudgeonly ways, she was hilarious sometimes. And everyone around the central couple was more interesting than the couple.
It's I actually had this discussion with someone about maybe it was even you, I don't remember, about like, you know, Hollywood blockbusters where like the top actors, you don't even want to see them, but it's always the bit characters that are more interesting than the main character, and that's exactly what Lovesick was. Andy was two-dimensional. Gregory stole the show.
Totally.
Gregory, the almost father-in-law who Andy is trying to get the blessing to marry Paige, and that guy was awesome. Paige was nothing too. Like the romance couple. There wasn't even chemistry between the two of them. It was just it was drab.
I kept wondering, why is Paige, the fiance, bothering with Andy, who's such a doofus, and why is Andy the narrator of this book? Because he's one of the least, maybe the least interesting character in the book, and he's telling the story.
Could you imagine if this book was told by Sid? That would have made this book like so much better.
Absolutely.
I would say, you know, we didn't enjoy it 100%. I mean, that's obvious. You know,
that's understatement.
However, it's like I would recommend someone reading it just to see the other characters, because it's obvious that Alex Wellen can. This is his first novel too. It's his first attempt. Yeah. And the characters are good, but the main characters aren't. The side ones are worth reading.
The author knows how to put together a book. That's obvious. He was an experienced writer before attempting the novel, so he knows how to put together a book. And like you said, he really knows how to develop characters. And I think he knows how to tell a story. It's just he chose to tell a romance, which is not my favorite genre anyway. But even so, he could have done better. He could have done, if he would have developed the subplot.
Or made it funnier.
It
was kind of like in the middle of genres, and it didn't have a good, like the blending of genres is awesome. Romantic comedies, awesome, but there just wasn't enough of either in this book to give it substance. So, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty obvious from our statements what we thought of this book.
We weren't happy.
No.
We're not happy.
To slap a label on it, I would have to say, I'll give it 2 stars, and I'm seriously giving it like a full star for the side characters alone. Like for Cookie, for Sid, for Manny, for the other crazy geriatric gangsters that try to, like, you know, run the pharmaceutical nature of the town. I mean, that's what I'm giving it. So 2 stars for me.
Okay, you're being so nice, and I thought I was being generous with 1.5, because I don't like romances in the first place, but I came to this with an open mind, and it just completely disappointed me. It was as fluffy as I was afraid it was going to be.
So not very happy with this one. No. Unfortunately, but that's all right. I mean, maybe something piqued your interest. You can give it a shot too. We'll be right back with our final book of the show. Welcome back to Hardcover Feedback, and now we're going to talk about the last book of the show, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter by Seth Grahame-Smith. When Abraham Lincoln discovers that his mother's death when he was a boy was actually a result of a vampire attack, he vows to rid the world of vampires. Follow Lincoln's journey from boy to hero, all the while destroying vampires at every turn. Uncover the real reasons behind some of Lincoln's actions, and discover Lincoln's valiant fight against the forces of the undead, which has remained in the shadows until now.
Soon Abe was well enough to sit up in bed, and Henry was comfortable enough to do away with his restraints altogether. Having failed to get answers to his more general vampire questions, Abe turned to a bottomless well of specifics. On sunlight. When we are newly made, the slightest sunlight blisters our skin and renders us ill, much the same way an excess of sunlight can sicken a man. Over time, we become resistant to these effects and are able to walk freely during the day, so long as we stray from harsh light. Our eyes, however, never adjust. On garlic. I'm afraid it merely makes you easier to perceive from a distance. on sleeping in coffins. I cannot speak for others, but I am quite comfortable in a bed. When Abe reached the question of how one becomes a vampire, Henry paused. I shall tell you how I came to be one.
Okay. First off, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is obviously a horror novel.
Yeah.
I think that I would say, you know, there are definitely high school students that could probably do well with this one, but
Yeah.
it's primarily an adult book, but
Yeah.
depends on how much gore and gruesome behavior you can handle.
It would be great for anyone who's really a vampire enthusiast, but it is a more sophisticated book. It's told in memoir format with a kind of a long introduction to it by the one who found the memoir. So the format might put younger readers off a little bit and say, oh, is this a biography? No, it's not a real biography.
It's
but it reads like one.
Right.
It reads so well because, and the way it's cut together, you know, the mix of what are supposed to be actual texts from Abe Lincoln and the authors piecing them together and the author's historical background given in, it flows just like an actual memoir.
Exactly.
I mean, if someone didn't know better and picked this up, if someone really didn't know better and picked this up and were just delusional about it, you know, it's very convincing.
It is.
As a fake, it's very convincing as a memoir.
Well, we should probably mention the fact that this is not Seth Grahame-Smith's first attempt at this kind of a thing. This is kind of a new subgenre of literature known as monster mashups, where they're taking classic pieces of literature and mixing it with crazy monsters. I mean, there's Pride and Prejudice and zombies, and Sense and Sensibility and sea monsters, and I can go on. There's so many of them right now by a variety of different authors. But those two were written by Seth Grahame-Smith as well.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of one of those things where, what if, you know, if vampires really did exist, if they really, really did, the way that Grahame-Smith uses the background of Abraham Lincoln and his actions and stuff like that, it totally makes sense that that could really have happened.
Yes.
Like one of the, and I say one of, because it's not the only reason, one of the main reasons why Lincoln was so anti-slavery was that all these, the slave owners were selling their slaves to vampires. That way they could stay fed. So, you know, oh, we have to, you know, this is, you know, it's just compiling up reasons on, you know, it's one of those crazy things where everything meshes.
Yes, and that, what you just mentioned about the slave owners and what they were doing with their slaves, that really struck the horror element to it. That really drove home, hey, this is not just some cool, fun action book with vampires in it. It's not action, this is horror. This is nasty, this is ugly, this is brutal, this is taking a part of American history that was already, you know, awful and horrifying and upping the ante with it some.
Pushing the envelope.
And consequently making Abe Lincoln out to be even more of a hero. So he's doing like a double duty, ridding two scourges at once. So
And we're not going to say how, you know, how successful he was when it comes to the end of the vampires, but we you know, should probably mention Henry, the man in the segment that you read. Henry is a vampire. Henry is not an evil vampire per se. He kind of
he chose his way.
Yes.
He didn't opt to be like most vampires opted to be. He deliberately and seeming very mindfully decided, I'm going to conduct myself as a moral person.
It's in different vampire stories and TV shows and movies, we see a different kind of, every vampire seems to be different. Some of them have ethics, some of them don't have any kind of conscience and will go around murdering without a blink of the eye. Grahame-Smith's novel definitely has both ends of the spectrum in it. There are those that are morally driven, and there are those that are cold-blooded killers. And then, of course, there's Abe Lincoln in the middle, once again, trying to,
Yeah.
try to end some more evil in the world. His death is also taken into account vampire-wise. It's interesting to view something that everyone knows and everyone is familiar with, and turn it on its ear, spin it around a couple times, and then put it on a platter and go, there you go. Let's see what you can do with this one. It was amazing. It really, really was.
The things we cannot say.
It's true.
Because we
There's
would
so
just
many
ruin
things
it for
we can't tell
people.
you
But
about,
there's
a lot of things.
Suffice it to say that this was so worth reading.
Absolutely.
It was, I had high hopes, but it was
Well,
even
you got to
better.
have high hopes with this. And the cover is just one of those things that jumps at you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it was amazing. And
Yeah,
I haven't read
it
any
lived
of,
up to the cover art.
it did. And I haven't read any of the other monster mashups. So this was my first experience with it. And
Okay.
I was not disappointed. I thought that this was brilliant. It was
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
Not like a promotional stunt. I mean, it was well done.
Yeah, it wasn't just capitalizing on the vampires are awesome thing that's going on right now, that vampires are
Right.
everywhere, they're ubiquitous, they're so deeply entrenched in pop culture right now, and so many projects just kind of jumped on the vampire bandwagon, and this is its own thing.
Right.
This is a trailblazer, it's not a follower, and so,
I agree.
yeah.
Well, let's see. I don't think this is also very difficult to figure out what our impressions of this are.
Yeah.
How many stars do you give this?
Ooh, I got 4 big ones. If
I gotta say, yeah.
If I could give it more than that, I would, but can't.
Yeah.
So,
4 stars. The historical aspects, the horror aspects,
yep.
the mixture of both. You can't argue with this. This is genius.
Yep.
And it really, really is.
yeah, it
4
rang
stars.
true all the way through. So,
Well, let's do a little recap on what we said here today. First one, we have A Tale Out of Luck by Willie Nelson, and we each gave that one 3 stars.
yeah.
The
Good one.
second one was Lovesick by Alex Wellen. Tracy gave that one 1.5,
Half.
and
Being
I gave
generous.
that one being generous, and I gave that one 2. And thirdly, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter by Seth Grahame-Smith. Both of us give it 4 stars. Not a lot of discrepancy here between the two of us. Hopefully that will change. But yeah, that's what we have for you today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.